And welcome. Just a word of explanation before we do anything else. Those of you who have been doing this for years will know normally we march or we walk from here all around the town in silence as far as the Friary Green, have a short service and then continue to walk in silence to the Methodist Church. This year we're starting here, we're finishing at the Methodist Church, we're following the same route, but we're going to stop 3 times on the way round for just a short reflection. And on each occasion, if you've got your book, you can look inside, there's a passage of scripture that we'll read, part of the story of Good Friday. There's a prayer or some silence. In the prayers, will you please say together the words that are in bold type? And then there will be a song, after which we'll move on to the next place. I'm not sure whether anyone has decreed whether we're to walk in silence or not, but you could talk quietly, okay. It's lovely to see so many of you here this morning from all sorts of different traditions, and indeed Bishop Michael is with us this morning, which we're delighted about. One thing I would say is if you could just move in a little bit closer, particularly over that way, so there's a bit more room to get down. Sadly, we forgot to tell the Three Spires Centre we were doing this morning, which is why we're outside the bollards and you're inside. You're okay?
Okay, you're not insured.
Oh, you're not insured. We're insured, all right? But obviously today is a day of joy in some senses because it's the day of our salvation, but it's also a very solemn day, so we'll try and communicate something of that in the way that we walk around and in the worship that we share together. We begin with the arrest of Jesus. While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you've come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour, when darkness reigns." Loving God, today in remembrance and awe, we tread to the holy ground of Calvary, this place of abandonment that has become the scene of our adoration. This place of suffering that has become the source of our peace. This place of violence that has become the battlefield on which love is victorious. Merciful God, as we relive the events of this day, it is with awe that we count again the cost of our salvation. Words cannot be found to express our thanksgiving. Accept our adoration. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. You became nothing, poured out to death. Many times I've wondered at your gift of life, and I'm in that place once again. And I'm in that place once again. And once again I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again I thank you. Once again I pour out my life. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross, my friend. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross, my friend. inside. Once again I thank you, once again I pour out my heart.
Now we will walk down the precinct and pause again outside the Guild Hall, or opposite White Stuff. We're standing outside the Guild Hall, which, as many of you will know, once housed the quart and still has the cells at the back. And as we stand here outside the place that for many years was the place where justice was meted out in Lichfield, we remember the trial that took place. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. "If you're the Messiah," they said, "tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you'll not believe me. And if I asked you, you wouldn't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." They all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He replied, "You say that I am." Then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You've said so," Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. God, when we choose the way of violence, responding to terror with aggression, and striking back in hatred and revenge,
forgive us and help us to choose the way of the cross.
God, when we collude with injustice, accepting as inevitable the ways of the world, and refusing to stand for your truth,
forgive us and help us to choose the way of the cross.
God, when we betray our deepest ideals, taking the safer step of compromise and turning away from integrity,
forgive us and help us to choose the way of the cross.
God, who met evil with love, lies with truth, and collusion with integrity, help us to choose your way.
Help us to choose the way of the cross. Amen.
Can you hear me at the back? Good, thank you. Sorry about that. As the soldiers led Jesus away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews."
The cross with every breath, the perfect life, the perfect death. You chose the cross, a crown of thorns you wore for us, and crowned us with eternal life. You chose the cross.
We'll follow on now down along Market Street. stand outside birthplace of Dr. Johnson, someone who had so much to do with a word in English, as we remember the death of the word of life, the Logos, the one who came to speak to us something of God's love. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness the sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. The grace we have been given is enough. When the mountains set before us won't move by faith, until by faith we start to climb, it is enough. When our cry for heaven's miracles rings hollow, like a doorbell howling in an empty house, it is enough. When from our waiting rooms of weakness we say yes to pressing on, it is enough. When we have reached the end of our energies and face the end of ourselves but can't yet see the end of the task, it is enough. Enough to know that you have loved us. Enough that we are called before all time. Enough that every fingerprint is valued. Enough that you remember every name. So we will embrace this grace and turn our hearts to face grace. Loosening the locks on our personal space, we'll make each home a place of grace. We'll drink from your wells till we're wasted on grace. We'll speak out your words till our tongues taste of grace. And we'll live to love your laws until our lives are laced with grace. Down dark and dingy alleys we will chase grace. We will hold as something precious every trace of grace. We will celebrate and consecrate this grace, because this grace we have been given is enough.
We'll start this with the chorus.
And he's here when we call him, bringing health, love and laughter to life now and ever after, for the good of us all. In a pioneer Bethlehem, passed by many a wandering stranger, the most precious word of life was heard gurgling in a manger, for the good of us all. And he's here when we call him, bringing health, love and laughter to life now and then. his lust and died forgiving for the good of us all. And he's here when we call him, bringing health, love and laughter to life now and ever after, for the good of us all, for the good of us all.
We're going to move from here around the edge of the square, up into Tamworth Street and into the Methodist Church for our closing worship. So we'd like to follow around that way now. It'll take a while.